Okay. So I'm Janani. I'm sure some of you have seen me around, and I promise you I'm as interesting as Siddharth in some ways at least. And I'm looking forward to hosting your call for you today. So if you've not heard of us before, we're part of Gifted World. I'm one of the community members, community leads, and we host a whole series of interesting conversations for people to join in and chat about and listen and learn from. And today is one of those fascinating conversations. So we have Sriram with us today, Sriram Naganathan. And Sriram is a very interesting person. He has done a whole bunch of things, including he's taught at a school called The School in Chennai. He's taught history there. He's a resource person with Ignis ERG. That's a group of people who are working to improve the quality of education for marginalized children across India. He's a core member of a group called Think, and if you've not heard of them before, it's THINQ. And they are also a fascinating set of minds and interests and people who do a lot of thinking about what is inquiry and what is critical thinking and how do you use that in education in different ways. Sriram is trained in business journalism, right? At the Times Research Foundation in Delhi and was a Reuters Fellow at the University of Oxford. He's done a whole bunch of things, and I'm really interested in learning from him today. So I'm going to hand it over to Sriram, and let's jump into it. Sriram, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Janani. Hi, guys. I hope this will be an interesting and fun conversation that we are going to have on a topic which, on the face of it, doesn't look all that fun. But what can be fun about Panama Canal? A lot of things are very interesting about Panama Canal. So let's just get into this, rather dive into the canal. Okay, now obviously the topmost question in our minds is that why are we talking about Panama Canal now? Let's try and set the context for why we are talking about Panama Canal now. It has been there for the 111 years now. It's from 1914. What is it? What is new about Panama Canal now? Now, again, setting the pictorial context, just imagine the world, the globe, and this is where Panama Canal is. The Panama Canal comes somewhere here, in between the North and South American continents, a very thin strip of land, and that's where this canal is. Now, how is it that beyond very vast countries in South America, beyond uh, forests and beyond rivers like Amazon, this small stretch of waterway, an artificial waterway, has become a very contentious issue. So, what is it about Panama Canal that is now the news of the day? Well, what is happening is that uh, Panama Canal is owned by Panama, of course. It is entirely inside the country of Panama. Why is it in the news? Because a certain gentleman by name Donald Trump, who is also the president of the US, has um, told, not in any other speech, in his inaugural address on the 20th of January, he has said that he wants to control Panama Canal. It is an entity which is within Panama. It is controlled by Panama government. And now US President Donald Trump, on his inaugural speech, not in a press conference, on the first day of his presidency, said that US will control Panama Canal. He says it is very critical to the American security. Now, he just immediately before becoming the president, he attended the funeral of President Jimmy Carter, who actually was the president who gave away Panama Canal to the Panama as country. Now he said that Carter was a good man, but giving Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake, and Trump thinks he should take it back. Trump does so. Does it mean talks and Panama agreeing to give US the canal? No. Trump says that he will not rule out using force to take over Panama Canal. Now, why is he saying all this? The reason why he is saying all this is that he thinks that Chinese soldiers are patrolling the Panama Canal, and it is China which controls Panama Canal. Panama Canal is in the backyard of US. You cannot have a country which US considers to be an enemy, a new Cold War kind of enemy, which is China, controlling something so close to you, a very important waterway so close to you. So therefore, Trump says all this. Trump is quite determined. Now, is Trump right? Now, this question is not asked very frequently because Trump is generally wrong. So we have to examine this a little bit more carefully than we examine the Trump statements. Is Trump, does his concern have a merit, any merit? Now, give it to him that Chinese are there in Panama. On the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal links, if you had seen the map, we'll see it again. If you have seen the map, Panama Canal links Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. So on the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal, the Chinese company called Landbridge, which has taken over Panama's largest port called Margarita Island. Now there is another company, Hong Kong based. Hong Kong is part of China, even though it has a slightly different administrative kind of setup, but it is controlled by China. Hutchison Holdings, they operate a port, Balboa, on the Pacific side. So you have the entrance and exit, whichever way you want to come, talk about. The both ends essentially of the canal are being controlled by Chinese. It is not that they are collecting toll or something like that. It is just that they are into commercial operations at these sites. They are doing unloading, loading, engineering operations, dredging, all that is done by these companies. They have they have enough and more going there. Now china's law Chinese law basically requires all companies to report information that they gather in areas where they operate to Chinese government. If Chinese government wants these companies which operate in Panama to tell them that, okay, now you have to tell us how many US ships have gone through the canal over the last X number of days, then the companies are bound to, legally, they are bound to give it to the Chinese government. Now, Trump, Trump is the kind of person who can exaggerate even how are you. So he exaggerated this to the extent saying that, Chinese soldiers are patrolling the canal. Now, that is not true. But there is a point that China controls both ends of the canal, right? Now, China's, is this anything unusual? Is Panama is not the only country that China does control. China has control in terms of port control. China has port control across, maybe 50 odd ports across the world in various countries. For example, Australia, which is a very close friend of America, which is part of some of their military exercises, has given away its port called Darwin for 99-year lease to China. Now, it is a Chinese company which controls Darwin. China owns ports in France, in Spain, in Sri Lanka, which is in our own neighborhood country next to us. There is a port called Hambantota Port, which is controlled by Chinese. Greece, Belgium, you name the country with ports, China has some presence there. So China's policy towards Panama is not something unusual. This is what China does across the world. They control ports, lots of ports. Okay, next. Yeah. So, what is this Panama Canal that is becoming so contentious? Now, it is a shore to shore. It's a 63 kilometers artificial waterway. It's been created by us humans. It is not a natural waterway. It is a artificial waterway. Now, what does the canal do? That again we will see in a minute. It enables ships to avoid a very long distance. It's a huge distance. That is about 13,000 kilometers distance around South America is what the ships are able to avoid. Now, 13,000 kilometers is not a short distance. 13,000 kilometers. Imagine this, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari is about 3,200, 3,300 kilometers. So you are looking at four times the distance between Kashmir and Kanyakumari. That is a distance that ships will save by taking Panama Canal rather than going around um, the South American continent. So that is, it's an enormous distance saved, because when you say distance saved, it's not just in terms of time, it is in terms of uh, hydrocarbon, it is in terms of petrol or whatever the ship uses as fuel. It is in terms of all that, including time, including the cost that the ship is incurring for per day. So all of that gets saved by taking a shorter route of Panama Canal. Now, around 14,000 ships pass through the canal every year. 40% of the US container traffic passes through the canal. Now, why is it? Because to reach San Francisco from New York, San Francisco is on the west coast of US, New York is on the east coast. To reach San Francisco from New York, or to reach New York from San Francisco, if by ship, you have to go through Panama Canal. There is no other option. So it is not just between countries that Panama Canal facilitates shipping trade. It is within the same country. If there is a shipment that goes from east coast of the US to the west coast of US, or vice versa, it goes through Panama Canal. Now, US accounts for a lot of traffic through the Panama Canal. Three-fourths of the cargo that goes through the canal is from the US, and China is the second biggest customer. So this is actually becoming a contention between the top two users of the canal. Next. Yeah. So, to know what the importance of this canal and why it is becoming so contentious, I think we need to dig a little bit. We need to go back 500 years when this canal was uh, thought of. Yeah, this is again to bring you back to the pictorial kind of imagination of where this is located. So you are in this S-shaped kind of an isthmus, as they call it, of Panama, which links the huge two continents of South America and North America. So it is in that S-shaped region there, somewhere there, the canal is located. All right. So this is just to give you an idea of the colonial past of the US. Now we will talk a bit about this. The portions that you see in green, which is the most dominant color in this?
Green.
Green. So, as you can see, Spain controlled much of America that time. They lost it. That's a very different story. But for all you know, America could have been, I mean, little different twists in history. The US that we see now could have been speaking Spanish totally, could have been a Spanish country. So, US, I mean, part of North America, quite a bit of South America was all Spanish, including the region that we call as Panama now. Everything is this is all Spanish. This slightly orangish kind of part is the Portuguese part. This is Brazil and the Amazon forest. The blue one is French, and the red one is the British territory, and you have a very small brown territory, which is the Dutch territory, and so on. Now, even the Russians had a part in the US, in the American continent. They owned Alaska. So, had this brown part on top or left is the Russian part. So,
And quick question from the chat. Gray is independent, right? Non-con.
Gray is unknown in the sense there were not too many people to be actually called independent or dependent. It was, these were like barren lands. Hardly there were more polar bears and reindeers or whatever compared to people. So not explored areas. I mean, this is the known kind of area. For instance, this entire orangish region, Portuguese region, the Portuguese initially occupied only the coast. They had no clue about what is inside. Then they started going inside and they occupied the Amazon River. So the entire Amazon territory became the Brazilian territory. That is how Portugal came to own Brazil, which was a very large country. But that one, the can we go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So this grave was not conquered by the colonizers, so to say. No European presence there. There were indigenous people, but very few, and nobody thought it was all interesting or it was important. So they just left it as such. These were like snow bound areas almost right through the year. Even now, it's a snowbound kind of area. Now, there are interesting aspects of this. For example, the left and top corner, which is the brown area, which is Alaska, that was owned by Russia. Had those guys continued in American continent, now what we see now as part of America would have been part of Russia. So Russia would be the only country in the world which would have spread across three continents: Europe, Asia, and America. So they would have had a presence in Alaska. So, but what happened was that Russia incurred a heavy debt in the Crimean War. That was sometime in the 19th century. So they had to pay back, the debt. So they needed money. So they said, which is a wasteland which we can palm off to somebody. They thought of this Alaska and talked to the U.S. government that time. They said, "Hey, are you guys willing to take this?" The U.S. said, "Okay." They negotiated a price of 2 cents per acre. It was just 2 cents per acre. That's like 2 rupees per acre, you know. And then they bought America bought the entire region of Alaska for $7.2 million or something like that, and it was not of much use that time. So it was actually called the Seward's Folly. It was the guy who bought it was blamed for incurring a huge expenditure on a wasteland, and then gold was discovered, and then oil was discovered, and now of course Russians will never get it back. But the point is that there were exchanges of territories between countries at that point of time. None of them involved indigenous people. That's a very different story. So when we use the word Columbus discovered America, we have to be very careful. Columbus discovered America, and then there were people there. So what is this discovery all about? Okay, so that is a very European way of saying things. But as you can see, the British, who did not have much at that point in time, we are talking about the 16th century or so. In about 100 years, they draw away these French guys to a province called Quebec in Canada, which still speaks French. So Canada has two official languages. One is English and the other is French, because Quebec is a French territory. And then Spain was more or less thrown out of the entire continent. They were just they could not hold any of these green parts that they had. Portugal was driven out of Brazil, even though Brazil speaks Portuguese and almost all the South American countries speak Spanish. All that is fine, but in terms of control, Spain and Portugal totally lost their empires, so to say. So did the French. Now, Dutch retained, because they had a very small territory. So they retained the Dutch country called Suriname, which is Dutch Guyana, as we call it. And French guys had French Guyana. French guys still have it. French Guyana is a part of France even now. This is a tiny country somewhere here above Brazil, which is still a part of France. It is actually a part of France. So if it is a part of European Union, even though it is located in South America, it is a part of European Union. But let's not get into all this. But the point is that this entire territory was being slowly occupied by colonial powers from Europe, and this stretch we are dealing with was occupied by the Spanish. Yes. Now, where is the in relation to Pacific Ocean? Is Atlantic on the east or in the west?
West.
Atlantic is in the west.
Yeah, I think so.
When you say US East Coast, you are talking about an Atlantic coast or Pacific coast?
East Coast.
Atlantic Ocean is in the east of um, South America.
Correct. So Atlantic
Atlantic
Ocean
Ocean is in the
is
east.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Atlantic is in the east and Pacific is in the west. I mean, going by our sense of directions, right? So when you say New York, New York is in the on the east coast of America. Rio de Janeiro is on the east coast of South America, and San Francisco is on the west coast of America, which is Pacific Ocean. Now, you would think that Panama Canal, when we say Panama Canal links Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, where do you think Atlantic is? On the east or west? Atlantic Ocean is on the east, Pacific Ocean is on the west in general. But in Panama Canal, where is Atlantic Ocean?
West.
So in Panama Canal, it is the exact reverse. Because of the shape of that, isthmus or the land, you have Atlantic on the west and Pacific in the east. Okay, this is really fascinating because this is somewhat like it's a kind of a twist. So how did we get to this? You can see that there is a port called Colon, which is the Atlantic port, and then you have Panama City, which is in the Pacific, which is on the east, and you have Colon on the north. Yeah, Colon is on the northwest, and Panama is in southeast. So the Panama Canal runs from Atlantic to Pacific, from northwest to southeast. Next. Yeah, so this is a very, very interesting one because uh, as long as you start, if you look at, if you stand on the Atlantic side and if you start looking at the west for Pacific, you would not get Panama Canal. But because Panama Canal is actually the other way around, you have to look towards your east to the Pacific. If you are standing on Atlantic, your natural tendency is to look west for the Pacific Ocean so that you can dig a canal. But at the Panama Canal, it is exactly the reverse. Now, how did this happen? How come people discovered this very strange route, which is the shortest route? It is the shortest route in the entire American continent, the link between two oceans, which is what we want for the ships to go. It is the shortest route. How come they discovered this place where the directions are reversed? Now, it is because it's a concept called obliquity, where the you don't chase the main objective. Like if this guy called Balboa was a Spanish explorer, he wanted gold. So he was looking for gold. He was actually looking for more and more gold. He landed on the Atlantic coast. He was looking for more and more gold. He just started moving into the country, moving into one more land, one more village, one more sort of populated kind of area, and asking people where the gold is and fighting wars. And he was doing all that. And suddenly somebody told him that, hey, if you stand on the mountain and look, you will see Pacific Ocean. So he was surprised because nobody has seen Pacific Ocean till that time. He was the first man, first European, not first man. He was the first European to spot the Pacific Ocean. So he saw this. The largest ocean in the world was not known to Europeans till he came along. Okay, around 1500 something. So when he came along, he looked for gold, not for the shortest route to the sea. So this concept of obliquity is interesting because there you look for you achieve your target in a very indirect way. So in lots of examples. For example, if there is a forest fire, what do you do? How do you contain a forest fire?
You use a red powder that does not make it aggravate, or y- you just put water on it.
Yeah, but there is a slightly more effective way, which manner in which forest fires are controlled by the forest guys. You know how they do it? They actually start another fire somewhere. So what
Right.
happens?
They
That
you can continue.
Yeah, so you start an artificial, the man-made fire patch that destroys vegetation, and so the fire which is spreading suddenly comes to that spot and has nothing to spread because vegetation has already been destroyed. So fire is contained. So you fight fire with fire. This is a typical forest department trick. So you don't put water because then you will take a lot of water and you will take a lot of time to contain. There is no guarantee that it will be contained. So what you do is that you actually have something called fire line, and you set fire to crops or vegetation, and then that fire starts spreading towards the other fire which is already there, and the fires meet, so to say, and the fires get extinguished themselves because there is nothing more to spread the fire. Yeah.
Sir,
Next.
if the damage is already done by your own fire, then what is the use of preventing the other fire?
Yeah, but the point is that some damage is already taken for granted. Some damage will be done. You cannot undo that damage. But how do you prevent the fire from spreading more? There are ways and ways. You can put water. You can use some fire. There is no fire extinguisher for a forest. So all you can do is to probably spray water. Now we have helicopters. We spray something. But one effective way is actually to create a patch by lighting fire, and that vegetation is destroyed. So when a small patch is totally destroyed, the fire needs something to spread. Fire will have to have continuous stretch of plants and trees in order to spread. If it doesn't have, it stops. So the point is to contain it within a very short kind of area. Yeah, are there hands going up? Yeah, somebody.
This was Viraj who has just asked his question already.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so that is it. Now, why is this important? Because it saves. I mean, we saw this. We just saw in words. We saw how much time and distance is saved by Panama Canal. It is not a very short distance. It is nearly 12,000, 13,000 kilometers you are saving. That means in terms of time. That means in terms of fuel. That means in terms of distance. All of this, it's not a short distance. It is 4 times the distance of your Kashmir to Kanyakumari distance. So it is a very long distance that you are going to save. So all the more reason why everyone needs something there at that small spot, where like a chicken neck, it's a small kind of a territory, which is where they should have a canal. And the way they had the canal was not to look westward all the time. They will not never be able to construct a canal. They started looking for gold, and suddenly they discovered that they have actually hit the ocean in the reverse direction. So because it is S-shaped, so you started in Atlantic from the west and you moved to Pacific in the east, even though Atlantic Ocean is in the east and Pacific is in the west. Yeah.
Sriram, a quick question connected to this slide that someone has asked. Someone was curious what is actually the reduction in carbon footprint in petrol usage because of this. Just wanted to share in case you wanted to respond.
I don't know, but you can definitely look it up. There must be. I mean, obviously, petrol saved of that kind of a distance is it leads to a carbon footprint, saving in that sense. So there is an environmental advantage in that. There is no question about that. Uh, how much exactly it is, I don't know. But all the numbers are here. So you have a 13,000 kilometers distance saved. The difference between the 21,000 and 8,300, that is the number you are talking about. That is the distance that the ship will not travel, and therefore the ship will save on fuel. So that is, you can compute your carbon footprint cost based on the ship's weight or whatever. Yeah.
Raghav has raised his hand. Raghav?
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
13,000 kilometers or is it 13,000 miles? Because then it will be not 20.
Kilometers. 12,000 kilometers. So it's not
Because
miles.
on the thing, on the picture, on the slide, it's showing 13,000
The
miles, and then
30,000 miles, that is different. The 13,000 miles versus 5,200 miles. So the saving is 8,000 miles. Whereas 20,900 kilometers versus 8,300 kilometers. So 12,500 kilometers, which is about 13,000 kilometers. So the saving is either 8,000 miles, you can say, or 13,000 kilometers or 12,500 kilometers.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So the saving just going around South American continent is that much. But there is also enormous saving for ships which travel from East Europe, Eastern Asia, that is basically China, to New York and other places. So you have 19,000, which is the distance. You have all kinds of distances which can be computed. How much a ship is saving is definite. How much a ship is saving depends on where the ship is traveling from to where it is going. So you have lots of numbers coming up. Yeah. Now the saving is not just about going around the South American continent. Tip of the South American continent, the southernmost tip is called Cape Horn. It is just shaped in the form of a horn. It is generally known to be the roughest sea passage in the world. It is not just time saving, it is enormous risk to go around that place. Because one, the winds and waves are very, very heavy. You have icebergs because Antarctica is close by. There are icebergs which are breaking from Antarctica, which will hinder your passage, which will, and icebergs, when they hit the ships, you know what happened to Titanic. So you have light issues because 6 months of the year at that point at Cape Horn, it will be darkness, long winter, and long summer. And it is generally known as the graveyard of ships and sailors. You have all the bad elements combined. You have winds, you have huge waves, you have icebergs, and on top of it, you don't have light. So it is darkness. Not just darkness of night and day, it is darkness almost for a continuous period. So there is a saying that below 40-degree latitude, there is no law. Below 50 degrees latitude, there is no God. So this is 56-degree latitude, this Cape Horn. It is a tip of South America. Now, somebody actually went around that place and was almost in trauma after that. He said he wrote something like this: "One sight of such coast is enough to make a man dream for a week about shipwrecks, peril, and death." That is the kind of nightmares you would have when you go around the Cape Horn. Can you guess who said this? Because he experienced that. He experienced the trauma. He went around.
Columbus?
Pardon?
Columbus?
No. Columbus didn't go around at all. He just went back.
Sorry, sorry. The person who did circumnavigation of the earth, was that the
Michael
one?
Bend. No, not really. This is actually Charles Darwin.
Oh,
Charles Darwin went on a ship and he went to the Galapagos Island and he went around the world literally. So he went
yesterday was
around.
his birthday.
So he went around this Cape Horn and said this because it was such a traumatic experience. Next slide. Yeah, this is a sculpture or a silhouette by a Chilean sculptor. Can you see a bird in the middle? It's an, can you see the space of a bird, the figure of a bird in the middle of the sculpture?
Yes.
Can you? Yeah, all. So that is the albatross. So this is a memorial for the sailors, the dead sailors and the shipwrecked people in Cape Horn. Lot of shipwrecks, lot of deaths. So a memorial was erected in 1992. Now this is the memorial's condition now. The winds are so heavy, they just tore open this memorial and it is gone. Obviously, the memorial was not erected with a soft metal or something. It was obviously very hard metal. They knew the conditions, they knew the wind conditions. They actually had a tough kind of a sculpture, but it is all gone. That is just to give you an idea of what kind of weather we are facing in Cape Horn. Yeah, so Panama, back to Panama. So Cape Horn was very difficult to navigate. Magellan and a few others went by that route, but ships were finding it difficult. There was huge risk. You may not come out alive, going around South America. Forget the time part and all, but you may not even live to see that. So there were early explorations. People realized that something could be done in that small strip of a land. Uh, 1530, that's about 500 years ago nearly, you had an European emperor ordering a survey. So he said that let's just find a route for ships traveling from Spain and Peru. The one reason was that Spain had conquered Mexico and some parts of the eastern America, and they had also conquered Peru, which was on the western part of America. So they wanted something which a sea route which could link these two, so that they could actually administer and control these two territories. You had the territory in the east, you had something in the west. So you wanted some kind of a sea route, so you could, otherwise you had to travel through the jungles. So you could actually try and create a sea route, so you could control these two territories better. They were essentially looting, basically. So they were not there for the benefit of the population. They were actually taking away the silver and the gold that they could find. So it was imperative for them to try and get something done between the two domains that they occupied, one in the east and one in the west. Now, somebody called Thomas Brown suggested that, okay, Panama seems to be the place where you could actually have a canal. So these thoughts were there 500 years. Nothing happened, but 400 years ago, there were thoughts. Now, Scotland effort is very interesting. I mean, let's spend a minute on it. Scotland, you must understand that Scotland is now part of Britain, but Scotland was a separate country. When 400 years ago, Scotland was a separate country. England was a separate country, and Scotland was a separate country. There was nothing like a UK, United Kingdom of Great Britain. It didn't exist. So Scotland saw that Spain. We saw the map earlier, right? Colonization map. So Scottish guys were looking at these fellows. They saw that, okay, in the French and the British, I mean the English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, everyone is occupying some interesting area in this new world. Americas were then called. We don't have anything. So why shouldn't we have something of our own? So Scottish guys decided that this is a brilliant strategy. They thought that they would occupy some place in the Panama region, and once they occupied, they would create trading posts. They would do what Panama government is doing now. They would charge fees from the ships, and or not the ships, but from anybody who wants to take the trading route. You want to even walk across, you should pay the Scots. So they will have a toll. They will have a gate. They will manage the gate and they will collect the money. So Scots thought that this is a great idea. Let's go and do something there. So they sent a few ships to Panama region. There was no country called Panama that time. So they landed here. They had brought a lot of things to trade, but everything except the idea was a disaster. Idea was good to trade, and they selected the nice spot, but everything else was disaster for them. It went very badly for them, and they did not even get things right. They got stuff like woolen stuff. Well, who's going to wear woolen in a tropical country? Now, who's going to trade in woolen? Nobody wanted that. So slowly, the Scots got disillusioned. They didn't know what to do. On top of everything, there were mosquitoes which were spreading malaria and yellow fever, and there were all kinds of other diseases also. So the people who came to trade from Scotland, they died. Almost all of them died. Nobody was left. Very few were left finally who could go back. Even the ships were wrecked. So now Scotland as a country had spent a lot of money on this expedition. So much money they have borrowed from merchants, from bankers, that they did not know how to repay, because there is no trading, there is no revenue, no nothing is happening, and people are dead and gone. So how are you going to repay the money? So they said, one, England came in, and they had said that they are the neighbors. So they said, why don't we actually merge? You merge your economy with us, and then we will repay all the debt that you have incurred. So England repaid the debt of Scotland, and Scotland agreed to merge with England. So mosquitoes, in some sense, were responsible for this Scotland merger with England. This is a very popular kind of notion, But for mosquitoes, Scotland would be a different, separate country now. But anyway, Scotland chose a very bad place called Darien scheme. Now we will see in the map what this Darien is all about. Then another interesting thing happened in California. California, I don't know. Some of you might have heard about. Some of you might have seen the movie called Gold Rush by Charlie Chaplin. There was a huge rush of gold from Americans in California. That time, California was not exactly a well-known part of America. They have just bought it, sort of. They got it from Mexico. So somebody discovered gold, and they discovered, so really good kind of gold very easily. So everyone started trooping to California from New York and other places coast. There was a massive rush. Now you can't. There was no train that time. There was no transport across the U.S. You had to cross mountains. You had to cross deserts. So the easiest route was through Panama. Sea route. You come by sea, land on one side of the Panama land, and you have to trek your way through the land, some 80-90 kilometers, and then you move to the Pacific coast, and then you take a ship, go to San Francisco or wherever you have to go, and you bid your luck in the California gold rush. So gold rush increased the need for a transit through Panama. So a lot of people were going through Panama, and that was because of the California gold rush, which lasted maybe for about 10 years or so. But enough number of people had gone, and it became rather famous. It was the shortest route. Okay, so now Panama, being an important sort of discovery for the California gold rush, Americans thought, why don't we build a railway here? So a railway was built. It took some years, but they had to build it to our mountains, they had to build it to our marshes, and it was the most profitable railway in the entire world at that point of time. Even though it was a very short distance, was the most profitable, very heavy volumes of freight. Whatever was going between the east and west coast of America, even now it goes through Panama. Okay, so all of that was going through the Panama route, but not through the canal. There was no canal that time, so there was only a railway line. And of course, to construct the railway line, there was a huge kind of a death toll, because people were dying of insects, people were dying of mosquito bites, people were dying of all kinds of diseases. Next. Yeah, this is called Darien Gap. Now, this gap is very important for even now. There is something called Pan American Highway, which goes from Alaska to Argentina and Chile. It is the longest highway in the entire world, but there is one small stretch of land which that highway cannot traverse even now. There is no road. That is called Darien Gap. Now, you might have read the papers that many Indians are being sent back by the US now as illegal migrants. They go through this Darien Gap. They land on the some country in South America, and then they go through these jungles, and then they go to Panama or they go to Mexico, and then they try and jump over the wall in the US and make it to the US. So this Darien Gap is the most difficult forest in the world right now. Nobody has thought of actually constructing a road or train or anything there. Nothing can happen. You cannot go through that place. It's so difficult. Yeah.
Go ahead, Viraj.
Sir, what do you mean by difficult when you mention it on a forest?
You cannot you cannot go you cannot return alive after entering that. Anything can kill you. A small mosquito can kill you there, a frog can kill you, a toad can kill you, some caterpillar can kill you. Everything is poisonous in that place. So it's nearly impossible to cross. So they don't build a road. They haven't built a road even now. No road.
Okay, sir.
Ritvik, you had a question?
So, like, isn't there like many criminals and all, like kidnappers there?
Pardon?
He's asking.
Aren't there like kidnappers there in the forest and all?
He's
I
asking
can't
if
do
the
that.
forest hosts a lot of criminal activity.
Not really. I mean, yeah, a little bit, but criminals are there because you can seek a refuge. If you are a criminal, you can seek a refuge in the forest. Nobody will catch you. But then mosquito will catch you that way.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's not because of human issues. It is because of a natural issues. It is because there are so many insects and animals, not big animals like lions or tigers, but there is so much. There is a plant. If you eat the plant, you will die. There is so much poison in that place, and it is nearly impossible to cross that place. It is absolutely impossible. You just try Darien Gap in YouTube and watch. There are several videos of how people cross it. It's a greatest adventure in the world. Yeah, can
Okay.
be. Yeah.
Raghav has a question.
So you said there was the longest highway in the world is from Alaska to Argentina, if I'm not wrong. So how do
Yeah.
they cross the Darien Gap if they if it's a highway if they're
They
connecting?
don't. No, there is no crossing. The highway stops in Panama,
So
and
doesn't so is it
you
like
can't cross.
there's a highway from Alaska to Panama and not a highway from Alaska to Argentina?
There is a highway from Alaska to Panama, you are right, and from Colombia to Argentina. Now, that was supposed to be a continuous highway from Alaska to Argentina, but one part cannot be built. So that part is left
So then
unbuilt.
how is there a highway from Panama to Argentina when there is a Darien Gap?
There is no highway from Panama to Argentina. For about 100 kilometers, there is no highway, there is no road, there is nothing.
Oh,
So you have to get off your vehicle at that last point and then get into a boat or a ship, go around the Darien Gap and get into the road again in Colombia.
us.
So even though it is a Pan American highway, there is a gap. That's why it's called the Darien Gap. Yeah.
Maharshi, another question.
Yes. So how will Trump get Panama Canal?
Wait. So we'll come
Yeah.
to that later. Yeah. So Panama Canal, it's interesting that we came around to building a waterway because one such waterway was already built. It was called the Suez Canal, which linked the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, which was in Asia. And the guy who built it is a guy called Ferdinand Lesseps, a French guy. So the France government thought that now they are like cats in building canals. So they called this Lesseps chap, Ferdinand Lesseps. They said, why don't we build a canal in Panama? Because this seems to be in great demand. And you are the person because you have built Suez Canal, which is even longer, which is Suez Canal is about 180 kilometers, 190 kilometers long. So you have already built a canal, successful ships are going through. You are the right person. So now come and head the scheme to construct a canal across Panama. So by the time the route and all was clear, now this guy took over the job. What he didn't, he banked on his Suez Canal success, and the moment he got him, it was a it was a company. So the idea was that the company shares, the value of the shares would shoot through the roof. It is like getting, this guy Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk on in your company. The moment he joins your board, the share of your board will be valuable because they are big people and they have come on the board. So your company is more valuable. So this guy came on board. There was a company. They started constructing a canal. Now a lot of scandals happened in that company, and the company could not construct the canal. They went bankrupt in 8 years. They closed down. Lesseps was actually jailed. He went to jail because of some financial irregularities, but they let him off because he was such a reputed guy. Now, there were health challenges in Panama. One is that every second fellow was dying because of malaria and yellow fever. Both were mosquito induced kind of diseases. You had also on top of this, you had tropical animals which nobody had seen earlier, like anything, some poisonous toad could kill you. Yeah, you had okay. Two people have questions. I'll just finish this slide and then we'll take that. Death rate was very high. There are 200 people in the project were dying every month, not just either people were sick or dying. So nobody was working. You see, so work nearly came to a halt. People were too sick to work or people were dead. Okay. Because of the reputation that if you join Panama Canal project, you would die. That was the name that was spread. So experienced workers, good guys, engineers would not join the project. Why would you want me to die? I don't want to go and die there. So that is the kind of reputation this canal achieved. So people were not joining. The company did not know what to do. They went belly up. They closed down. No canal. Yeah. Now questions. You had Viraj had one question. Do you have
Yes,
questions
sir.
or?
I wanted to ask that what caused the Suez Canal to become a success, but the Panama Canal Company to go bankrupt?
Yeah, we will come to that little later. We will just we are going to talk about it. Yeah. So Panama, the engineering call. So the problem with Lesseps was that he had constructed Suez, which was a plain canal, which was just surface to surface. Uh, there was no problem because there were no mountains. There was no vegetation. It was a desert, nearly a desert. So he could just dig a canal and link two seas. That is all he could do. Very simple, very big achievement, but simple achievement. Now, something like the two sea levels are very different. The Atlantic sea level is lower than the Pacific sea level. Lesseps did not think of this. The sea level was actually lower. Okay. And there are two problems. One is the sea level was different. So Pacific sea level was higher than the Atlantic sea level. And second, in between, you had mountains in Panama. So it is not Suez. There was no mountain, there was nothing. So you just plain sand, you just dig a canal. Here you had mountains. So how are you going to lift the ships above the mountains? Slope, because you had mountains, the sand or whatever material, the mud was also very sticky, and if you dig a canal, then the slope would slide into the canal and just close it. So they were facing these problems. It was just not possible to keep the canal working because there were mudslides, landslides, and they will just fill the canal. Whatever you have dug will be filled. So there were all kinds. There was a slope problem. There was a difference in height problem between the two oceans, which Lesseps did not take into consideration. And then there was a problem of the mountain combining in between. Yeah, next. Yeah, so why did Lesseps fail? Why did he succeed in constructing Suez and why did he fail in Panama? Because he thought that he was the boss of constructing canals anywhere in the world and because he had constructed one. So, some kind of faith in his own kind of ability. And he was ultimately a diplomat, he was not an engineer. So, Lesseps, was a smooth talker, could raise money, could do all that. He could head a company, he could raise money, but he was not an engineer. He did not know the technicality of the issue. He was not a technical guy. He was a diplomat, and so therefore he had total disregard for the technical issues. If you went and told him that look, there is a problem because the ocean levels are different, he would probably not even look at it as a problem.
Sriram
And
has a question. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, his own success proved to be a disadvantage because that stopped him from thinking better. Yeah, Sumuk, somebody had a question.
Sumuk, you want to ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Sir, why didn't any experienced workers want to join this project?
Because there were so many health problems, they would catch malaria and die. That was the fear. People were dying. Lots of people were dying. Healthy people who went there were catching fevers and dying, and there were no cures for these fevers. These fevers were unknown. Nobody knew where this fever was coming from. So people were dying in hundreds. So nobody wanted to go there. If it is a disease prone area, why would anybody want to go? Because one is likely to catch a disease and die.
Yes, sir. Okay,
Can
sir.
we move?
Thank you.
Yeah, so what happened was 1889, French guys gave up saying that no, sorry, we cannot do anything more. And Lesseps went out of business and bankrupt. And then the Americans came in and they took over. The moment they saw this, they realized that there are issues here. There is one big issue is the mountain issue. So you have to sort it out. They harnessed a river called the Chagres River. They created an artificial dam called the Gajun Lake. They created a lake, and through the lake, the ship would pass. They created a lock system. So what happens is that the ship would come to some place, and then the locks would close, the ship would raise, locks would close, ship would raise. So ship would keep going up and up, and then it will reach a lake. It will go through the lake, and then will come down gradually and go to the other ocean. So the problem solved, two problems solved, ocean height problem solved, difference problem solved. You could also cross the mountain. It was literally lifting the ship over the mountain. Janani, can we just play the video here?
Waterway on Earth. It turns this journey into the Panama Canal is the most important waterway on Earth. It turns this journey into this, and it brings the United States closer to both Europe and Asia. The marvel that is the Panama Canal is both narrow and short, and yet every year, about 14,600 ships pass through its locks. Here is how. Canals have existed in some capacity for nearly all of human history. As traveling by boat is one of the most ancient modes of transport, it's no wonder that ancient engineers figured out a way to connect two bodies of water together, creating new, more efficient shipping routes. However, the construction of the Suez Canal in 1869 set a new precedent for what was possible, a pathway connecting two seas together. With the Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea now connected, governments throughout the West set their sights on connecting two even bigger bodies of water together, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. During the California gold rush of the mid-19th century, Panama was often used as a shortcut for shipping goods from New York to California. Ships would dock either on the Pacific or Atlantic side and transport their goods across what is now Panama. Eventually, a railroad was built to make the shortcut more efficient. The French had different plans, though. In 1881, work began on building a sea-level canal similar to Egypt's Suez Canal. However, a combination of poor planning and inefficient design led to France failing to make any meaningful headway into constructing a canal. After significant worker casualties due to illness, floods, and poor management, the U.S. took over construction in 1904. Chief Engineer John Frank Stevens took one look at the geography and instantly knew why the French had failed. A sea-level canal was simply not possible. Thus, work began on the creation of the world's then largest artificial lake, Gatun Lake. By damming the nearby Chagres River, engineers created the artificial lake to function as a water reservoir system, 85 feet above sea level. This would work in conjunction with a series of canal locks to raise and lower ships as needed as they passed through the canal. Further expansion projects would then ensue as the ship traffic passing through the canal steadily increased throughout the years. So how does the Panama Canal work? As a cargo boat nears the canal's approach channels from the sea, several tugboats come to greet it. The tugboats attach a tow line to the cargo ship and move them into alignment with the canal lock's narrow entrance. Once a cargo ship is firmly within a lock, a tugboat remains behind to keep it in place. The lock gate behind it then shuts, while the lock gate ahead gradually opens, displacing water at a steady pace, thus raising the ship so that it can then enter the next lock, where it will eventually join Gatun Lake. Ships are protected by rubber fenders installed along the lock's sides, preventing them from scraping or chafing as they pass through. They then cross Gatun Lake towards a different set of locks on the other side, where the process is repeated. It is crucial for this process to be gradual, as this keeps the water flowing at a manageable rate. The average amount of time it takes for a ship to pass through the Panama Canal is about 11 hours, with most of that time spent waiting for other ships to pass. As the canal's locks functioned as gates for ships to pass through, building additional locks was the first order of business when the Panama Canal was expanded during the late 2000s. As of 2021, the Panama Canal features 4 separate sets of canal locks for ships to pass through: the Gatun and Agua Clara locks facing the Atlantic, and the Cacholi and Miraflores locks facing the Pacific. The original locks measured 110 feet wide and 1,050 feet long, and could fit ships up to 965 feet in length and 60 feet in beam. Ships built with specifications that would fit through the canal were dubbed Panamax class ships. They could fit up to 5,000 standard shipping containers on board. While this may seem like a huge amount of cargo, this figure is dwarfed by the additional capacity granted by the canal's newer, bigger locks. With the construction of new locks, new Panamax or Neo-Panamax class ships could accommodate up to 13,000 containers. While the Panama Canal has yet to face a blockage similar to the Suez Canal's mishap earlier this year, maintenance has been an ongoing issue. The estimated
Janani, I think we
annual
can stop
cost
here.
to maintain it has
Yeah. Can move to the next slide.
Sure. I also wanted to share the time check that you asked
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Can we move to the next slide? Because I have to rush through the slides now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is broadly where the Panama Canal is. It's a closer picture of a map. You have the ships entering from the Atlantic side. You have the lake in the middle, and then you have the ships going to the east to join the Pacific Ocean. So that's the Panama Canal. Yeah. Can we move to the next slide? This is, the canal. This is a cut called the Culebra Cut, where it was very difficult to prevent the landslides, so they had to manage it with a stepped kind of an arrangement. It's again an engineering feat. Yeah, next. Yeah. So America took over the Panama. Americans constructed the Panama Canal, so they ran it. Even though it was within the country called Panama, they ran the Panama Canal itself was owned by Americans. So they constructed it in 10 years, and it was very useful for them during the Second World War. And it is very useful, of course, for all trade traffic across the world. In 1999, they handed over Panama Canal to Panama. It is like owning a part of somebody else, owning a part in your house, within your house. So that somebody at some point of time decides, okay, now you take it. I'm not going to come anywhere. Can we move to the next? So Panama took over in 1990, 25 years ago. Panama took over. They expanded the project. All this you saw, 14,000 ships pass through the year. Now, what is Panama getting out of this? Huge money. You see, Panama Canal, you don't enter and exit without paying. You pay per ship, you pay something like $60,000 for a very normal ship, cargo ship, up to $300,000. And now Panama has introduced newer mechanisms, like you pay if you want to jump the queue, you pay a certain amount. Okay. Now recently, a company, an LNG, natural gas company, liquefied natural gas company, paid 2.4 million for one passage. For a ship. That's the money they paid because they wanted to jump the queue. They wanted to be in the first. So Panama is now charging a lot of money, for ships to be in the queue and cross, and to jump the queue and cross. All this is money for Panama. Panama's economy runs on Panama Canal. Now, China moves in. Now, Panama sort of dissociated. So there is a country called Taiwan. Whether it's a country or not, it's a different issue. Now, Panama cut off the ties with Taiwan and recognized China. And Chinese investments in Panama are increasing. There are mining projects, construction projects, rail projects, all kinds of projects. And Panama, forget the Panama Papers. Let's not get into that. So recently, after the Trump threat that he will take over Panama Canal, Panama walked out of what is called Belt and Road Initiative of China. China is trying to organize countries across the world. Wherever they have ports, they are trying to have infrastructure everywhere. So Panama was part of that. Panama walked out recently. Now, what does the future hold like at this point of time? Yeah, next. Yeah, so just above Panama, you can see there is a country called Nicaragua. Now, it is a slightly bigger country, and Nicaragua is also building a canal. That is a 278 kilometers canal compared to, say, a 67 kilometers canal of Panama, shore to shore. You have a nearly 4 times longer canal. It's a pretty much same mechanism. There is a lake in between, a natural lake called Lake Nicaragua. Ships will come up to that and exit. So Nicaragua is building a canal. Now, the canal will be for even much larger ships which cannot go through Panama Canal now. Now, what are the negatives in this new building of canal? I mean, as we talked about the Darien Gap and all, these are environmentally very sensitive places, extraordinarily sensitive spots in the world, biodiversity and all of that. So you have potential environment damage happening. You have local communities who live there being displaced. And if Panama has to charge so much money to allow ships to pass through a 60-kilometer kind of a route, now a 270-kilometer route will mean so much more money. Now, does it make sense for the shipping company? Does it make sense for the government to have that kind of fare? We don't know. Now, most interesting point is that guess who is funding it? The funding guys are Chinese here, okay, not the US. The Nicaragua project is also funded by Chinese. Like Panama has a lot of Chinese presence at both ends of the canal, Nicaragua is being funded by a Chinese company. Now, one big option for Panama alternative is the Northwest Passage above Canada. We'll see that in about, it's shorter in fact. Though, can anybody tell me why it is not possible right now? In the sense, I mean, it is possible, at the same time there is a one big major difficulty going above Canada for the ships. Why don't ships go above Canada?
There is, I think, the North Pole there, so it's like
Uh,
all frozen.
Yeah, it's all frozen, so it is
it's very
ice, right? So
Yeah.
you need icebreaker ships to lead the ship. So it's very difficult for anyone to go through that passage because essentially it is, you're talking about Arctic Circle, it is frozen. But this is the only place in the world where global warming is actually leading to something interesting benefit probably, because of the global warming phenomenon. Arctic ice is melting. So for the first time, ships were able to actually cross the Arctic Ocean, and that is called the Northwest Passage. You have now 4 or 5 months of the year, ships can actually go through without much ice, without an icebreaker. Some 10-15 years ago, a ship went through the Northwest Passage without icebreaker. So it is becoming possible, and very soon we will have the ice totally vanishing there, and you will have only a sea. And that point of time, the ship traffic can actually pick up. So very large ships can go through. In 1998, the number of ships going through the Northwest Passage above Canada is increasing. 11 ships went in 1988. Now you have 47. That number will increase to hundreds very soon. This is the, on the green side is the Northwest Passage, the yellow side is the Northeast Passage. Both surround the Arctic Circle and the Arctic Ocean. They are within the Arctic Circle and Arctic Ocean. The both are literally frozen much of the year. So not much shipping happens through this place. But as the ice is melting, as it is becoming possible to navigate through the waters here, now shipping companies are trying to explore this, nations are trying to explore this area. Now, this has also become very interesting because Canada now suddenly realizes that what used to be just ice is actually water, and international shipping is going to use that more and more. So, why can't we charge money? Why do we allow these ships to pass through without paying anything? Like Panama is charging, we should also charge. Panama is charging for an artificially constructed canal. We should charge for what is naturally available. So Canada suddenly declared that these are all internal waters for us. They are not sort of international waters. If you need to use that, you have to get our permission. Next. Yeah. So advantage for shipping because temperatures are warming up, and Arctic could be free of ice in the for entire summer in 2030s. Whether let's not get into the discussion of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It may be either way. Now this is far better than the Cape Horn, so that is not even a competition because there are no winds here. There are no there is the kind of uh, issues, problems they face in going through Cape Horn, ships will not face here. Drawbacks, lots of small islands, Canadian islands. So you have to navigate through the islands it's a very tricky thing to do. And there are no ports or facility. There are no ports. If there is a problem with the fish has to cross the entire country of Canada or go across from east to west, and then only you will have something. There are no ports, there is nothing available. Big problem. Canada thinks it is their internal waters. US thinks it is international waters. Okay. Now they have renamed it in their textbooks. Like Americans renamed Gulf of Mexico as Gulf of America. Canada has renamed this Northwest Passage as Canada's internal waters. Now there have been diplomatic incidents between US and Canada. Now they have agreed to disagree for decades, but Trump is a very different kind of fellow. So this agree to disagree, does it work in a Trump era? We don't know. Next. Yeah, now what is China up to? It's very interesting because China will use that Northwest Passage. China is the biggest trading country in the world. China's trading volume is the same as US and Germany, the second and third put together. It is that large. So they would want this Northwest Passage, if it opens up, will shave off a good amount of distance for Chinese ships from China to Europe. But China has no border with Arctic, but it has joined an Arctic Council. Okay, now we will see how this works. Next. Yeah, that is just a map of the Northwest Passage, as they call it. And there is something called Northeast Passage, which we may not have much time to discuss now, but that is just a short note. Yeah, next. Yeah, Northeast. Okay, can we just go to the previous one? Yeah, right above Russia, you will see something called Northeast Passage. Russia is a very sad country because Russia has one of the longest coastlines in the world. Almost all of it is not usable because the coastline is an Arctic Ocean coastline. Now, what will you do in an Arctic Ocean coastline even if you have some 24,000 kilometers coastline? What will you do? You can't have ships there. You can't have ports there. There are only one or two. Murmansk is one. There are very few uh, ports which are all weather ports in Russia. So Russia is very sad. So passage is possible in above Russia in the Arctic Ocean. Passage is possible only for a few months. And there is a law of sea convention which governs all the sea trade conventions, customs, treaties. All of that is governed by that. Now, big question is that with somebody like Trump in charge, will nations stick to law? Will they stick to rule? We don't know. Each country is passing its own norm. Russia has just said that, like Canada says, it is all internal. You have to get our clearance. Russia now says you have to get a diplomatic clearance to use the passage above Arctic Ocean. You have to get a diplomatic clearance from us. Till then, they were not saying this. Now they passed a law saying that any ship which goes through Arctic Ocean above us will have to get a diplomatic clearance from us. Otherwise, we will not allow it. Next. Yeah, this is the big question that we are looking at. Russia and Canada are both Arctic countries. I mean, they are just adjacent to. If you look at the globe, these two countries occupy much of the Arctic Circle. Russia on one side and Canada on the other side. Then all these small countries like Norway, Finland, all come in between. These two are the biggies. They are literally the owners of these northwest northeast passages. If the ice melts down and if the waters become clear enough for the ships to go, then these two countries will have to do something about it. Now, China and US are going to be the biggest users of these passages because they are the biggest traders. I mean, they actually have more ships than others. So it is literally owners of these so-called northeast and northwest passages versus the users who are China and America. Till now, China and America were on one side and Russia and Canada on the other side. Now, Trump is changing that equation. Trump seems to be against China. So, does this equation hold good? Is it China and US on one side now, or is it China versus US? Is China against US, or rather, is US against China now? What is the new equation that is emerging in the sea routes that we will have to see? But Trump will. He seems very keen on doing something. Going and also remember that Panama was invaded by the US in 1989. They just came in and took away their president. He was involved in a narcotics trade. He was a drug dealer, so they put him in jail. So they do all this. Panama has no means to fight US or for that matter any country. So if US wants, they can take it tomorrow. Will they do it? It's an open question, but it is a very strong likelihood that Trump will do something. Yeah. Questions?
Thank you, Sriram. This it's left me feeling like we are in the middle of history being made.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, history is being made. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions in the chat, and I know a couple of people have raised their hands also. Let me go through the questions in the chat. They've been waiting patiently. So I'm going from the top. So one big question everyone's having is what will Trump actually do? So that's one big question. I think you answered it briefly. Is there anything more you want to add on that front?
Trump will not do anything drastic immediately, but he will. He wants. See, what does he want to do? He wants to prevent the Chinese influence. He wants to control the Chinese influence. That is all he wants. He doesn't care about Panama or Canal or anything. So he just wants. He doesn't want China in his backyard. Okay, in the American continent, he doesn't want Chinese in. But Chinese are there everywhere. They are in Nicaragua. They are funding companies. China is the biggest trading partner for the US. So it's not going to be easy to say that okay, from tomorrow I won't talk to you. So it's not easy at all. They are the biggest trading partners to each other. So he will have to figure a way out. At the same time, he will have to he will exercise his control and try and get more leeway. He has already got Panama to walk out of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So he made one call and Panama has already walked out. So what all he will do and what all will work, we don't know, but wait and watch.
Yeah, interesting. And then there was another question about the length of the Panama Canal. I think you mentioned something like 63 kilometers, right?
Yeah, around 67, 68. See, there are all kinds of length. There is a deep water to deep water length. That is about 82 or 85. There is a 67, which is like shore to shore. So I don't know what length is really meaningful, but it
Yeah.
is 1/3 the size of Suez.
Okay, great. Then Jayanand had a question about what is the freshwater footprint of this? As the canal uses a lot of fresh water, is there an alternative to save the fresh water?
See, there is really no alternative to say the fresh water because the seawater will not work on the mechanisms of locks and all for long because that will corrode the metal and it will generate its own problems. So luckily Panama gets a lot of rains, but last year 2023 I think Panama had a deficient rainfall and the lake was drying up. So they were not allowing many ships to go through the canal. So there was a problem. Unless the lake is full, you cannot have ships go through. If the lake bed is dry, then what do? You are gone. So there is a problem there. The problem is coming up.
Okay. Dr. Prabha Sudarshan has a question. Can I invite you to unmute and ask it? Dr. Prabha?
Sir,
Okay,
sir,
go
I
ahead.
asked a question if Trump's politics with Greenland and Denmark interferes with the trading in the North Pole, sir.
Yeah, yeah. See, Trump has a larger kind of a picture. He wants to again. Greenland is very close to what's called the Northwest Passage. As the ice melts and more water is available for shipping, Greenland becomes very important. So he wants to get Greenland. He wants to get. He will. He wants to. He's a real estate guy basically. So you must understand that Trump is actually a builder. Like in whichever building you are residing could have been built by Trump. That is his background. So he looks at everything as a real estate property that he wants to own. So that is his outlook, which we don't know which way, how far the nations will accommodate some requests.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Viraj, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask sir that even though US and China are the one of the biggest trading partners, and China has both are very high economics, and there are many traders from China and America who trade. Why does Trump doesn't want China to get involved
Get involved in what? In running
in
the
the
sea. Yeah,
yes
he sees China as a inimical country rather than as a friend. So that is broadly the picture. Even though it may be the biggest trading partner and all, that's a different story. But he thinks that the more the concession made to Chinese, the more powerful they will get. And right now, America is the most powerful nation. That status itself will be threatened if you allow China to do all that they are doing. They own ports everywhere, they have roads everywhere, they have trains everywhere, they run companies, they run mines, they run power projects. So, where does this stop? And Trump is not very happy with that. So, you don't want anyone except you to be the most powerful country in the world.
So it's a threat to power and worry about.
Yeah.
Sumuk, go ahead.
Sir, why did they want to build the Panama Canal while all of these issues came under medical conditions, all of these came?
They were building the Panama Canal just about. See, Americans were lucky because just about the time they took over the project, the death stopped because the medicine for malaria was discovered. Quinine and all of that. Ronald Ross discovered that mosquitoes were causing malaria. That itself was a big discovery. Now, people working in Panama area earlier did not know that mosquitoes were causing malaria. So they were happily getting bitten by mosquitoes and they were dying. They could not link the two. They did not know that they were dying because of mosquito bites. So when Americans took over, that time Ronald Ross in India had discovered that it is mosquito which causes the malarial fever and yellow fever, and therefore medicines are available for that. Quinine and this, whatever medicines were available. So malaria was treatable, and you could protect. American engineers, for example, slept in mosquito nets. French engineers did not sleep in mosquito nets. So the moment you prevent yourself from getting bitten by mosquito, you are okay. You are not too bad. So the death was not a big issue anymore.
Okay, sir. And all of those engineering challenges?
Yeah, the Americans figured it out. I mean, they got the locks, so the ship rises in one lock, the water rises, so the ship rises, and then moves to the next lock, water rises, ship rises, so the ship is actually taken up to whatever 100 feet high, and then ship goes through the lake, and then ships comes down gradually. So it was not a sea level canal. Americans figured out that they had to actually make things work by using locks and letting the ships rise and making them move.
Yes, okay, sir.
Thanks for the question, Sumuk. For me, that part about mosquitoes losing Scotland's independence was terribly funny and somewhat scary. Yeah. Viraj, you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. I have one more question. How did the Americans deal with the diseases and the malaria and all?
That's what, by the time just about, it was just lucky. The Americans were lucky because just about the time Americans got the company and started the project, it was also discovered that mosquitoes, which were plenty there, were responsible for malaria. Till the time there was no connection. Malaria was thought to be from bad odor, bad smell, all kinds of things. The name malaria itself is a bad smell. So, mosquitoes had no connection with malaria. By the time Americans took over, it was known. So Americans gave one mosquito net to each fellow who went there. Now you sleep in this and you protect yourself from mosquito bite. Apply oil, apply whatever. Probably there was odor mask, we don't know. But whatever was there, they applied all that and prevented themselves from getting bitten by mosquitoes. And they probably eradicated some mosquitoes as well. So all that worked. So the death toll came down drastically.
Great. Maharshi, you had a question earlier, but then you lowered your hand. Do you still have a question?
Actually, no.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And I think I must be someone else, but your username is Dr. Prabha Sudarshan. They mentioned that it feels like two-faced politics, the conversation between US and China right now in the chat. Yeah. Great. Any other questions, anybody? Otherwise, we had a very engaging and interesting conversation. Sriram sir is also going to teach some more courses on history at Gifted World, and you'll get more details about that in the emails that we send you with the recordings. It was an interesting conversation. I felt like I traveled the world a little bit. Thank you, Sriram. Thank you for making the time to be here with us.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot.
everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
You can drop off now. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. Otherwise, you can drop off now. So Muk, so the next masterclass is happening next on the 22nd. There's an interesting masterclass on narrative thinking and how do you use that in exams now that exam season is coming.
Okay, ma'am. Thank
Yes.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Last question, if you don't mind, can I ask?
Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
please.
Okay, is it possible that because of odomos and mosquito nets and all that stuff, is it possible to kill species of mosquitoes that aren't harmful to humans and they're dying because we are using odomos and nets and stuff?
Quite possible. Odomas, see, you must understand that odomas and mosquito nets are not exactly mosquito killers. They prevent you from getting bitten by mosquitoes. Whereas you have these insecticides, flit, and things like that, which actually kill mosquitoes. There are electronic gadgets which kill mosquitoes. So odomas is not a mosquito killer. Odomas is driving away mosquitoes. That's what they
Is
say.
it?
And
Okay.
that's the same with mosquito nets. So the how to control mosquito populations, whether it is there is nothing like a good mosquito, but there is a harmful mosquito which creates creates problems for us, and there are mosquitoes which are not that harmful. Lots of research is being done. So there are discoveries like there is something happening in Singapore at the genetic level which will transform the entire mosquito population of the world into a very sterile population. So there won't be mosquitoes after, say, a few generations. A few years later, no mosquito. Mosquitoes are gone. So that is the level of research to eradicate mosquito mosquitoes themselves from the world. So a lot of research is happening. I don't know where each is right now, but yes, that's the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That was an interesting question, Shrishti. Thank you for asking that. I am curious and scared to know what a world without mosquitoes would be like. Super.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. All right. Can we log off? I think. Yeah, I think.